The pilot exhales sharply, forcing a stiff nod. He turns without another word and steps into the cockpit, yanking the door shut behind him. Malcolm leans forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. His mind is turning. He's met plenty of people like this, people who underestimate him, who can't accept that he belongs in spaces they believe are off limits. But this isn't just about attitude. This pilot is on edge, and that's a problem. Rachel lingers near Malcolm's seat, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "I'm so sorry about that," she says, her voice low. "I don't know what his problem is, but this isn't normal." Malcolm glances at her, giving her a small, reassuring nod. "I know," he says simply, because he does. Then, just as the engines hum louder, ready for takeoff, a loud *thud* echoes from the cockpit. Everyone freezes. The co-pilot jerks his head around. Rachel's breath catches in her throat. Malcolm slowly straightens in his seat, his eyes locked on the closed cockpit door. Something isn't right, and whatever it is, it's about to change everything. The sound of the *thud* still lingers in the cabin, making the air feel heavier. Everyone is frozen for a moment, eyes locked on the cockpit door. The co-pilot hesitates, then unbuckles his seatbelt and pushes himself up. Something is wrong. Even he knows it now. Malcolm doesn't move, but he watches everything. His instincts are sharp, and right now, they're telling him that whatever just happened in that cockpit isn't normal. He glances at Rachel, whose hands are now gripping the back of a seat. She looks nervous, unsure whether to speak or stay quiet. Another sound, this time softer, like a heavy breath against a microphone. Then silence again. The co-pilot takes a cautious step forward and knocks on the cockpit door. "Captain," no answer. Malcolm straightens in his seat, tension settling into his shoulders. He's not the type to panic. He didn't build his empire by losing his cool. But right now, the situation is shifting fast, and he doesn't like what it's turning into. Rachel finally speaks up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Should we do something?" The co-pilot doesn't answer right away. He knocks again, harder this time. "Captain, I need you to respond." Still nothing. Then, just as the co-pilot reaches for the door, there's movement. A slow, dragging sound from inside the cockpit. Malcolm hears it clearly, and something about it makes his pulse quicken. The co-pilot's hand hovers over the handle, unsure whether to open the door or call for help. And then the cockpit door unlocks. The silence that follows is almost worse than the noise. The door slowly creaks open just an inch, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. The co-pilot hesitates. Rachel takes a step back. "Malcolm," he leans forward, eyes narrowing. Because whatever is on the other side of that door, it's about to answer every question that's been building since this flight began. And something tells him, this pilot's bad attitude is the least of their problems. The crack in the cockpit door remains still, like an open question no one is ready to answer. The co-pilot stands frozen, his hand hovering near the handle, his breath uneven. Rachel grips the seat beside her, eyes darting between Malcolm and the door, waiting for someone to make the first move. Then, the door slowly swings open. The pilot stands there, barely. His face is pale, his forehead damp with sweat. His breathing is uneven, almost labored. His eyes, the same ones that had been filled with resentment just moments ago, now hold something else entirely: fear. Malcolm watches him carefully, his instincts on high alert. Something is wrong, seriously wrong. The arrogant pilot from before looks nothing like the man standing in front of them now. He opens his mouth to speak, but no words come out. Instead, his knees buckle. The co-pilot lunges forward, catching him before he collapses completely. "Captain," he shouts, but there's no response. The pilot's head tilts to the side, his breath's ragged. His fingers twitch as he clutches at his chest, his whole body trembling. Rachel gasps. Malcolm, still seated, watches it all unfold, his mind racing. The pieces click together fast. This isn't just nerves. This isn't some sudden panic attack. This is something worse. Then, out of nowhere, the pilot grabs the co-pilot's shirt, his grip surprisingly strong. His lips part, and this time, a single strained word escapes. Poison. The roar of jet engines fills the air as a sleek, multi-million-dollar private jet prepares for takeoff. Inside, the atmosphere should be calm, luxurious even, but something is off. The tension is thick, and all eyes are on one man. Malcolm Hayes, a self-made billionaire, sits quietly in his leather seat, dressed sharp but casual. He's used to flying in style, but today he's getting a very different experience. Across from him, the pilot, a middle-aged man with a stiff posture and a cold stare, is clearly uncomfortable. From the moment Malcolm boarded, the pilot's attitude had been off. The forced politeness, the sidelong glances, the way he hesitated before taking Malcolm's ID, something wasn't right. At first, Malcolm brushed it off. He was no stranger to judgment, even at his level of success. But then the comments started. Subtle at first, then less so. Didn't expect someone like *U* to own a jet like this, the pilot mutters under his breath, pretending to check a document. Malcolm exhales, keeping his cool. He's had his fair share of moments like this, but today, something feels different. Then, out of nowhere, the pilot's words turn sharp. His voice rises just enough for others to hear. People like you don't belong in places like this. The cabin goes silent. The flight attendants freeze. Even the co-pilot looks stunned. Malcolm lifts his gaze, locking eyes with the man who just disrespected him in front of everyone. A slow, knowing smile creeps onto Malcolm's face. He's not the kind of man to argue. He doesn't need to. Because what's about to happen next? Oh, the universe has a way of handling people like this. And in just 5 minutes, karma is about to strike in a way no one saw coming. What happens next will shock you. Stay tuned. The cabin remains still, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Malcolm doesn't flinch. He's been here before, judged before someone even knew his name. But this time, it's different. This isn't some stranger on the street or an uninformed bystander. This is a man responsible for flying the jet he owns. A man who should be acting professionally, but instead, he's making it clear he has a problem with Malcolm being here. Malcolm leans back in his seat, watching the pilot's face, studying the way his jaw tightens. He could respond, call him out, demand respect, but he doesn't need to. He knows something the pilot doesn't. The flight attendants exchanged nervous glances. One of them, a young woman named Rachel, steps forward cautiously. "Sir, can I get you anything before we take off?" she asks, her voice barely above a whisper. She's not talking to Malcolm. She's speaking to the pilot, as if trying to ease the growing tension. But the pilot ignores her, keeping his eyes locked on Malcolm. "People like you think money can buy everything," the pilot mutters under his breath. His voice is laced with something deeper than just dislike. Malcolm has seen this look before, resentment, bitterness. He wonders what this man's story is. But right now, it doesn't matter. Malcolm finally speaks, his voice calm but firm. "And people like you think ignorance is free." His words are measured, controlled. He's not here to argue. He's here to see what happens next. The co-pilot, an older man with a grey beard, shifts uncomfortably. He looks like he wants to say something but thinks better of it. Malcolm notices his hesitation. Maybe he knows what's coming. Then, something changes. The pilot's face flickers with something close to panic. He steps back, gripping the doorframe. Malcolm catches it, the slight shake in his hand. The shift in his breathing. Something is wrong. The jet hasn't even left the ground, but it's clear. The pilot is about to face something he never saw coming. And Malcolm, he's just waiting for karma to do its work. The tension lingers, thick and suffocating, as the pilot clenches his jaw, trying to steady himself. He shifts uncomfortably, his fingers tapping against the panel beside the cockpit door. It's subtle, but Malcolm notices. This isn't just arrogance anymore. there's something else beneath the pilot's anger, something deeper. A crack in his confidence. Malcolm doesn't move. He watches, waiting. He spent years learning how to read people, how to see what's hidden beneath the surface. And right now, this pilot, he's unraveling. Rachel, the flight attendant, steps closer, her voice careful. "Captain, would you like a moment before we take off?" Her words are polite, but there's a quiet urgency in them. She sees it too. Something is off. The co-pilot shifts in his seat, adjusting his headset. He looks from the pilot to Malcolm and back again, uncertainty written all over his face. "We need to start pre-flight checks," he says, his tone firm but uneasy. The night was supposed to be like any other for Dr. Marcus Taylor. As an experienced emergency physician, he had seen it all: accidents, heart attacks, and life-or-death situations where every second mattered. But nothing could have prepared him for what was about to happen on this call. The wailing siren of the ambulance cut through the quiet streets as he sat in the back, working tirelessly to stabilize the critically injured patient lying before him. His hands moved with precision, his mind focused, until the vehicle came to a sudden, jarring stop. Outside, red and blue lights flashed in the dark. Officer Bradley, a veteran cop with a reputation for being aggressive, had pulled them over. His face was tight with suspicion as he approached the driver's window. "License and registration," he demanded, his voice sharp. The paramedic behind the wheel barely had time to explain that they were transporting a critical patient before the officer's eyes landed on the man in the back, Dr. Taylor. Something in Officer Bradley shifted. His stare hardened. He saw a black man in scrubs and made his own assumptions. "Step out of the vehicle," he barked, his hand moving toward his holster. Dr. Taylor, confused but composed, held up his hands. "Officer, I'm a doctor. We have a patient fighting for their life in here," he explained, his voice steady, but Bradley wasn't listening. The next moments happened too fast. The officer yanked open the door, grabbing Dr. Taylor's arm. The paramedic shouted in protest, but before anyone could react, a fist connected. Pain exploded across Dr. Taylor's jaw as he stumbled back, catching himself against the gurney. The heart monitor beside him beat urgently, a reminder of the real emergency at hand. And then, before the officer could escalate things further, a voice from inside the ambulance changed everything. A voice that made the blood drain from Bradley's face. A voice that, in an instant, turned his reckless decision into something he would regret for the rest of his life. "What happens next will leave you speechless. Stay tuned." The voice from inside the ambulance was weak but unmistakable. "Officer, please, help me." For the first time that night, Officer Bradley hesitated. His grip loosened on Dr. Taylor's arm as his eyes darted toward the stretcher. The patient, hidden behind tubes and wires, was struggling to speak. Even in the dim lighting of the ambulance, there was something familiar about them. Bradley's brows knitted together as his mind raced. Dr. Taylor steadied himself, his jaw throbbing, but his focus remained on his patient. "We don't have time for this," he said firmly. "If you want to do your job, let us do ours first." The paramedic took the chance to step between them. "Look, officer, we were responding to a call from a private residence. This patient is in critical condition. If we don't get to hospital now, they won't make it." Bradley still wasn't listening, not fully. His heart was pounding, but not from adrenaline. That voice, he knew that voice. He took a cautious step closer, peering at the frail figure strapped to the gurney. The patient turned their heads slightly, their eyes glassy but pleading. Then it hit him like a punch to the gut. The color drained from Bradley's face. His lips parted, but no words came out. He swallowed hard, his stance shifting as the weight of the moment crashed down on him. Dr. Taylor caught the change immediately. "You know them, don't you?" he asked, his voice laced with something between anger and curiosity. Bradley didn't answer. He just stood there, gripping his belt, his mind spiraling. How could this be happening? Of all the people in this city, of all the emergencies that could have unfolded tonight, why this one? The paramedic shook his head, climbing back into the driver's seat. "We're leaving. Either let us go, or explain to the hospital why you stopped us." Bradley's fingers twitched at his side. His training, his authority, his instincts, they all clashed inside him. But now, none of it mattered, because inside that ambulance was someone he never expected to see, someone who could change everything. And he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The ambulance engine rumbled as the paramedic prepared to drive off, but Officer Bradley still hadn't moved. His hand hovered near his radio, his mind clouded with uncertainty. His job was to control situations, but right now, he felt completely out of control.